now what we are discussing. The first thing was HOMI creation. Now we are talking about maintenance of the HOMI. Remember that uh, creation of the HOMI, the mechanism is called counter current multiplication. You multiply solute inside the interstitium, and by that you attract water. Okay, there's a reason I'll tell you why I'm emphasizing this. This is countercurrent exchanger. Countercurrent exchanger is the Vasa Recta, and that is to do with maintenance of the HOMI. Now, why the emphasis? Is sometimes a very unfortunate thing happens when you are asked about countercurrent exchanger in an SCQ and in your exams, and you, in your hurry, write down countercurrent multiplication. You can imagine uh, what kind of marks would you get. The examiner asked you the exchanger, and you, in your hurry, did not understand that, and you wrote down the completely a completely different mechanism. So again, there is no cramming here. If you remember, countercurrent multiplication means all that single effect, uh, 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 pump, trapping all that solute, multiplying it with each cycle. That is the countercurrent multiplier. However, the Vasa Recta is the countercurrent exchanger, and we will see why are we using the word exchanger. Okay, so word of caution: be careful, read the question carefully. Okay. Now, there are two mechanisms by which Vasa Recta saves the day. There are two mechanisms how Vasa Recta basically maintains, helps the HOMI do its job. One is, it is just like the loop of Henle, it is a looped structure. It's not a straight line. It's not a straight tube. It is in loop. Okay. The only difference is the flow of blood is opposite than flow of tubular fluid. Okay. Now, one is the hair loop structure of the Vasa recta. So, what is coming down is being affected by what is going up, and both of the coming down and the going up, both bloods are being affected by the neighborhood, the interstitium, just like the loop of Henle. Just like the loop of Henle. What you did at the thick ascending limb of loop of Henle had a bearing on the thin descending limb of loop of Henle. Yes? So the descending limb, the blood in the descending limb of the Vasa recta will be influenced by what is happening in the interstitium. And when it trans does a transaction with that interstitium, whatever change happens has an effect on the ascending limb of loop of Henle. I'll tell you what's going on. Okay. Second point is the sluggish flow. If I don't know if you remember, we mentioned this right at the beginning of the renal lectures when we were discussing the functional anatomy of the renal tubule, the whole thing, the nephron. And I mentioned that as you go deeper into the medulla, the overall flow of blood decreases, right? If you remember that, it's the least in the inner medulla. That now has come to the fore. This is the sluggish blood flow through the Vasa recta is important. You don't want a high velocity blood to go through this whole system, because remember that high velocity fluids have a washing away, quote unquote, washing away effect. If you increase velocity of this fluid, it will tend to wash away the fluid because the solute will not have time to be reabsorbed back in the ascending limb. We will talk about this. So just remember that the fluid, the blood flow through this vasa recta, the deepest portions of the medullary interstitium is slow. This also helps in keeping the HOMI intact. Okay. Now, let's see the hair loop structure. If it were not a hair loop, what would have happened? Well, disaster. What would have happened? Okay, you would have put in a fluid. Okay, imagine that this is the neighborhood. This is the same. You have the interstitium with increasing osmolarity that we have discussed just now, being created by the HOMI, right? And instead of the loop, the hair loop, you have a straight blood vessel going through and through, right? Okay. This is an interesting, good exercise. Not explained in Guyton as such. Okay, the comparison is not there. Guyton only discusses the hair loop. I discussed this lack of hair loop as well, just to show you how important the hair loop structure is. Okay, now in the straight tube, when you introduce a fluid with 300 milliosmol osmolarity, it won't have significant problems right in the beginning, because it's 300 outside, it's 300, everybody's happy. Okay, but as it goes down, as it goes deeper, it then comes across increasing osmolarity, the HOMI. The more deeper it goes, the more uh, concentrated environment it goes into. What starts to happen? The blue arrows depict the water. It starts to give out its water and it starts to pixelute, right? So it just goes down, literally goes down the drain, giving out its water, picking up solute. By the end of this straight tube, what started with a value of 300 has now become 750. Okay, and what started with 300 and should have been 600, 900, and 1200 is now basically 1000. So one circulation of blood through this straight tube raised the osmolarity of blood from 300 to 750, obviously because it gave out its water and picked up a lot of solute. And where did it pick the solute from? From the precious HOMI scenario, atmosphere. Decreasing the HOMI concentration of solute or its osmolarity, the whole point was to maintain it, and hence the match is lost. Okay. Now let's see the beauty of, all you need to do is just uh, 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 put a loop in this long tube. Make a loop, not a straight line. Just make a loop like this, like this. So this tube is here. It's the descending limb. It loops and then becomes the same tube becomes the ascending limb and exits. Okay, this has very important implications. So the same discussion is when the blood is coming back into the system, it's 300, say for example, just to explain it to you. 300, when it comes down, it encounters an increasing HOMI, 600, 900, and maybe 1200 if we are working at the top speed, a top concentration. The countercurrent multiplier is really churning away. So as this 300 goes down the descending limb, it will pick up solute, give out its water, right? That it did here as well. Okay. So by the time it hits the tip of the loop of the pin here, hair pin, it becomes one with the interstitial. The osmolarity is 1200, the osmolarity is 1200. Okay, it reflects the same. However, it's not a straight tube. It will now pin back on its own. And remember, this distance is shown, this is not the case. They are, the descending and ascending limbs are, they lie very close to each other. Okay. So what now happens is you are parading this blood that you brought in, and all sorts of things happen to it. You're parading this blood back out of the ascending limb, uh, from the same neighborhood but in a reverse direction. And this reverse direction makes all the difference. How? Now, this hyperosmolar blood, when it goes through the ascending limb, it now goes through that hyperosmolar interstitium in the reverse direction. So as it rises through the ascending limb, it comes across a decreasing gradient of osmolarity. Yes, it's clear. So what will it do? It will pick up water. It will give out its solute. There you have it. As it ascends, it keeps on doing it, picking up that water, giving out that solute till it exits. So what happens in the net? The net is you take out water out and very less solute. This is the net. There are important implications, important summaries coming up, but I'll pause here so that you understand what has just happened. The hairpin structure, basically what it did is It conserved the solute of the interstitium and took away the water, its own water, and also the water that came out of the loop of Henle and the collecting duct. Capiche? You happy with that? I hope you've understood it. Again, these are not replacements for your own reading. That reading is very important. Those discussions over cups of teas or coffee or whatever you have with your colleagues is very important. These things, physiology nourishes, flourishes, develops based on discussions. Okay. So, having said the bare bone thing, now I'll come to the important conclusions. The obvious thing we've done that the water that would have messed the HOMI is picked up by the Vasa Recta and taken away. That's one thing. There's a salt implication as well, an implication, a complication related to salt. Remember NaCl, it crystallizes, right? Uh, it would, if you allow it to stay in one place, it will tend to form crystals. Yes. So in countercurrent multiplication, you are dealing with a lot of sodium chloride and you're dumping it in an area where there is interstitium. Interstitium is not known for its traffic, is it? What is known for its traffic? The tubule, lots of fluid is passing through it. The vasa recta, it's a blood vessel, a lot of blood is passing through it. But what happens in the interstitium? Interstitium is just a space, right? And you're dumping so much solute in there, you always run a risk of making crystals there. So vasa recta, another function of vasa recta is keeping it real, keeping it fluid, literally. The salt should remain a salt in granular form, not make crystals because that will create a lot of issues, as you can imagine. So the moving vasa recta keeps stirring the the interstitium, pushing in water, stirring it a bit, picking it up, and so on and so forth. So it keeps on stirring it like you stir your tea with a spoon. Yes, so that crystal formation is inhibited. Another thing is if you notice the 300 and the 350, if you noticed. So this osmolarity of the leaving fluid is a tad more than what came in, right? So any extra salt is also taken up by the vasa recta. Any extra salt, okay? So you need just enough salt to create the HOMI, do the benefit, the business of extra water reabsorption, but at the same time not form crystals. Okay, so HOMI does both. It has got the stirring effect, and then it picks off your extra top up of salt so that you don't have any untoward issue in your interstitium. Okay, and the sluggish flow we discussed, it needs to be sluggish so that it that doesn't run off with a lot of solute. That's that.